Welcome to the Bad Boss Journal, the dope podcast where you can anonymously say exactly what you think about your bad boss, toxic work environment, and find out how to handle
it. Welcome to another episode of the Bad Boss Journal. My name is Michelle, and I'm here with Ava, my co-host.
Hello, everyone.
And today's special guest is Carla. Hey, Carla.
Hey, guys. Thanks for having me on.
Of course, of course. So why don't you tell everybody a little bit about yourself, and then you can kind of share your bad boss story.
Sure. I have spent many years in the corporate world, and I've had a lot of different bosses. I've worked for all kinds of different firms in terms of size. I've worked for small firms and medium-sized firms and large firms. I've had a lot of great bosses, but I had one particularly bad boss, and that's the one that I really wanted to share my story about today.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So should I just dive right in?
Absolutely.
Yeah, go for it. Yeah.
Okay, great. This story is from about 10 years ago, a little over 10 years ago, and that's kind of important because the world has evolved a bit since my experience, but I still think there's a lot to be learned from it. So I go to work with this small financial firm that specializes in doing investments in private companies. So basically, this firm finds deals for really, really wealthy people to invest in. Mm-hmm. And things are a little odd from the get-go. The firm is owned by a husband and wife team. I'll call them Bonnie and Clyde. They have about 20 people working for them, and they work really, really hard to create this illusion that they're running a super successful business. Bonnie is always decked out in the, biggest designer label. She's got diamonds dripping off of her. Clyde is bragging all the time about how he cashed out of his last business. My job is to find investors for the deals. And with this check size that they're needing to get, like I said before, people have to be really, really wealthy to be able to invest in these deals. So once I take the job, I get in there, I quickly figure out that these guys are barely doing any deals. They've only done a couple, which is totally out of line with their marketing shtick. And that's kind of how they sort of bring people into their firm. This promise of all these deals that they're doing. So at my stage of life, I have a toddler at home. My husband and I are starting to think about having a second child, but we're not really sure when we want to do it. And I've just obviously started this new job. So about 6 months in, we decided to kind of give it a go, thinking it's going to take a little bit of time. But I get extremely lucky, and I get pregnant right off the bat. So like I said, this was over 10 years ago. The perception of women in the workplace was a little different back then. Women are still trying to prove themselves, to prove they're equally as capable as men. And I feel pretty guilty about the fact that I've just sort of marched through their doors, gotten pregnant, and 9 months down the road, I'm going to have to leave for maternity. And especially since it's a small firm. So I tell my bosses that, this is that I'm going to be, expecting or that I am expecting, and I'm going to be taking maternity at some point in the future. They're, fairly gracious about it. Don't really get too worked up about it. All is well. But I come to find out that Bonnie, the wife, has also been trying to get pregnant and has not had quite such good luck. So fast forward, 9 months. Everyone at the firm has pretty much figured out that these guys are pathological liars and, pretty shady business people. So we're working on a live deal right around my due date. I feel obviously just torn about the whole thing. I feel guilty. I really don't want to leave my team in a lurch. And so I kind of just assure everyone, I can help out a little bit on maternity leave. It's not a big deal. I'll be reachable. I can help, basically. So it comes to, right around my due date. I go into labor on a Tuesday. I had actually taken Monday off went into labor on Tuesday, like around noon, and had my daughter at 8 o'clock that night.
That's very
Everything
efficient, just FYI.
it was wonderful. It was a very child. She came right on out. It was all good. No issues other than I was pretty tired. And she went to the nursery that night. I got some sleep. The next morning, nurse brings my daughter in. All is well. And then around noon, Bonnie calls me and she says, "Hey, we really need to get going on these investor letters for this deal. When do you think you're going to be able to get them out? We really need to get them out ASAP." Okay, so she knew that I had just given birth. I had sent an announcement out to everyone, and I was like, "Well, as you know, I just gave birth last night, so I'm really still in recovery mode. But I'll try to work on them. Once I get home." And she's actually, believe it or not, annoyed by this, which is bananas. So now that I have the benefit of maturity and hindsight, I should have just told her to go sod off, and I should have never stepped in that office again. But because I'm a people pleaser and I don't want to lose my job, I'm worried about my resume, I start working on this stupid deal once I get home, which involves me calling investors all over the world, in Australia, Singapore, Europe, all hours of the day and night. And I really, really overdid it. It was not a healthy way to conduct my maternity leave at all. I mean, you really need to take the time to recover. Your body's been through a lot. Take time to bond with your child, get proper nutrition. And I didn't do that, and I was just under the gun with these people all the time. And there was an issue that cropped up because I was so tired and running on fumes, and there was an issue with a non-disclosure agreement that didn't get signed. And the team is actually admonishing me for this. I'm like, are you people crazy? Like, I'm honestly running on fumes. So anyway, everyone's anxious for me to get back to the office, and so I go back after only 7 weeks, which is also,
oh my gosh,
insane. And like I said, things are better now, but 7 weeks while working through maternity leave was just horrible. So, it actually gets even a little bit worse, if you can believe it. So I go back, I'm nursing, and there's no facility to accommodate this in their offices. There's we're in an office building. We have a small office space, but we have a shared bathroom on the hall. And I literally sit in the stall and pump breast milk. That is how I had to do it 2 or 3 times a day.
Yikes.
It was insane. So the whole thing was utterly ridiculous. And I'm convinced that, this was driven by this woman, Bonnie. And I think she was just super jealous that I was able to conceive and she wasn't. And she was hell bent on making my life a living hell. When I'm, look back on the work that I was doing, she easily could have stepped in and done it, or had somebody else do it. But she was just really, wanting to make my life hell, like I said. So finally, I came to my senses. I stuck it out for 2 years in total at that place. I got the hell out of there, went on to a much better job, and it ended up, being a good resume builder, because I did have some exposure to some good transactions and some good experience with fundraising. But the whole thing took a huge toll on my health, and honestly, to this day, I am still recovering. It's taken me years to sort of, because I just went from one job to the next without taking that time to properly recover.
Right.
So,
and as a person, so I actually worked in birth work for over a decade, and it's like, it's interesting when like the science aspect of what happens to you, but also as a person who has had 3 babies, and with the second and third, I really did push myself, right? Like, it's amazing what we put ourselves through, even when we know better, right?
To what end? It was, I look back and I'm like, to what end?
Yeah.
If I
what
had
did that do?
Said no, I mean, I blame myself for a lot of this, right? I could have easily said no, but you feel, I think there's just these power dynamics in a workplace, and nobody wants to things are better now. And, I went on to
Right.
work for firms that had extremely generous and reasonable maternity policies. But unfortunately, I'd already had my children by that point.
Yeah, no. Yeah, but it is interesting how it's like there's these set expectations of what you're supposed to be able to do.
Yeah.
I went to go teach yoga when I was 6 weeks postpartum with my third. I was physically shaking because my body could not handle it. But I
Yeah.
felt so guilty, and everyone's just like, "Oh no, you've done this before. You've done this 3 times." And it's a yoga studio, and it's like if I had just put my foot down and just said no, they would have figured it out. But
Right.
what is it with us always feeling guilty and feeling
Feeling guilty.
bad?
And it's a cultural thing, I think, because I have a really close friend from New Zealand, and they take a year off after the baby.
Yeah,
That's
that's
just it.
true.
They take a year off, and everyone expects that it takes the mother a while to heal. But
Yeah.
I think some of the cultural things that we see around us, celebrities bouncing back, and there's this whole thing around bouncing
Hmm.
back quickly and getting your post pregnancy body back, and I just think, to what end? Like, why does it have to be so quick? Why can't we just take our time with it and really take the time that our bodies need to recover? Take that time
Yeah.
that, our children need to bond with us. It's
Hmm.
So I'm not a mother, but so what's the standard time now for maternity leave? How much time do you know?
well, I think most sort of Fortune 100, 500 firms, the bigger firms that have really established, HR departments and are on the, front
Hmm.
lines of the best thinking. I think 4 and 5 months now is pretty standard.
Oh wow.
So
So
it's
yeah.
much better. But smaller firms are a different ball of wax because they don't have the resources to be able to cover when somebody's out. And so it's just tricky for smaller firms. And that was kind of
Right.
what I was dealing with.
But also, we can't even, and that's just something that's the privilege of being able to. I know that sounds bad, but like being able to get into a firm like that, right?
Yeah.
Because in any sort of other job that is retail based, or restaurant based,
Oh,
you don't get anything, and they will purposely keep you at under like 30 hours to potentially keep you constantly as a part-time level employee. I've had to quit so many jobs while because I had my babies really young, and I thought, oh, I could build a career later. I was like the complete opposite of everyone, right? I was like, oh, I could deal with that stuff later. I'll just do this now. And I've had to quit so many places that I worked for until like I started doing more like health related, jobs, and was able to contract myself out. Like I was learning eventually that, little things. And, I used to work for a lot of places as like the front end manager at places, but they don't even call you a manager. Well, they call you a manager, but you're still part time. It's
mhm.
insane.
Yeah.
So I would work just 30 hours, never past that, and I would never get benefits. And this went on for years.
What's
So yeah.
interesting is that for military and for government, it is still only 6 weeks. So
Wow.
yeah, it's still only 6 weeks.
Well, I will tell you that after 7 weeks, I mean, granted, I had worked through, my body wasn't even close to being ready to go
Oh,
back.
no way.
No
But
way.
also, the baby is a newborn for 3 months. For
Yeah.
3 months, your baby is still learning to regulate their body temperature and is building an immune system, right? Like they're literally
And,
just
oh,
knitting
by the
themselves from
way,
scratch.
is up all night. And so no
Oh,
one
yeah.
can feasibly be up all night and then go to work and be productive during the day. That's bananas.
100%. Yeah.
Yeah. So listen, I think we're moving in the right direction and we've made progress, but there's still plenty more we could
There's
do. I
so
would
much
love to
more.
see us in a
Yeah.
New Zealand type situation
Mhm.
where we take all like the proper time that we need. And
Yeah. I mean, doesn't Sweden also do that, in Finland and all that? Like they all have a year.
the Nordic countries are always
Yeah.
they're always unbelievable.
So
Oh.
so Carla, interesting question. Were you ever able to have a frank discussion with Bonnie about the situation before you departed that company?
You know what? I've come a long way. I think back then I was just chicken. These people they were shady, and I saw some serious bad behavior there. They were also connected to some really powerful people in this country. And
Wow.
I just kind of wanted to skate out of there and get out of Dodge
Mm-hmm.
and put my head down because I just didn't see a lot of upside for me in doing that.
Yeah.
I think now, being a little bit older and having more financial security, I would be in a better position to, really just say, you guys are like, this is wrong. But at that point, I couldn't have done it.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I could have, but it wasn't the right move for me.
But also, I feel like that's another thing, right? Like that whole, like when you're growing up, you're constantly told not to talk back. I don't know if that was you, but like for me, being
Yeah.
told not to talk back, right? Anytime I wanted to express my opinion, I'd be told to shut up or I'd get some sort of like physical reprimanding, right?
Yep.
And then so growing up like that the whole time, and all of a sudden as an adult, I'm supposed to speak my mind. I'm supposed to speak all this. And that's another thing that drives me nuts. Like even now, I can say like I know there's a part of you that feels like, oh yeah, I must have been chicken. I didn't, that kind of thing. But I know I would have a very difficult time with that right now, even at my age, having learned all I have, because confrontation is not something like we're used to. Like we're not used to standing up for ourselves, right? And hopefully, like the younger generations are learning that, like learning to be different because of the way they're being brought up now, right? Like we don't. I mean, most of us don't do that anymore, right? We don't say like, "Oh, don't talk back." I mean, I'm sure there's a good bunch of people who do, but like I don't do that, because I do want my daughter to have a voice and just be like, just say, speak her truth in essence, right?
Yeah, I mean, I see the way my children are being taught. They're teenagers now, preteens and teenagers, and it feels like things are just moving in a more collaborative
Mm-hmm.
direction as opposed to the model that we grew up with. And they
Mm-hmm.
have an open dialogue with their teachers, and they're encouraged to advocate for themselves, and so they get that practice and they get that
Right.
sense of safety in doing that we didn't have. We felt like if you were to stand up to someone growing up when we did, you know that was not necessarily going to be a safe situation. you,
No.
you didn't know what kind
Right.
of reaction you were going to get, and it might not have been a pretty one.
Yeah.
So that brings up an interesting perspective that maybe. So Carla, if your daughter came to you, fast forward, a couple years from now, several years from now, and she was going through a similar situation, what advice would you give her?
So I would tell her that no job is worth your health, and that these things have consequences.
Mm-hmm.
That you really have to be very careful about how you treat your body. And not just in this situation, but in many, many different situations. I think that's one
Mm-hmm.
thing that if I could go back and do anything differently, I mean, there are a million things
Mm-hmm.
we all do differently, but I think a focus on health from a very young age in terms of nutrition and exercise and sunlight and stress is one of
Mm.
the most important things that people
Right.
people can do, and that's the biggest advice I would have for my daughter. And I think I would just say, listen, you just have to say no. You have to set boundaries, and you have to understand that there may be a confrontation there. And if there is, then that's good practice for you. If you get pushed out, you have options, right? You can
Right.
you can figure something else out. But I think the laws now are there to protect you, and the laws may have been there to protect me back then. I just was not in that mindset. I was in a mindset of guilt. I was in a mindset of just not wanting to disappoint people and not wanting to let down my team.
Mm-hmm.
But I think I would just tell my daughter, okay, you got to let that go, because your team's important, but your health is something that is, you need it to succeed in life, and you need it to be happy. So you're going to have to put that first.
Yeah. That's a great question, Ava.
Yeah, no, I think Carla's answer is really sound advice, and I think, regardless of the bad boss situation, I think we all need to hear those things,
Mm-hmm.
especially about health and stress. And, there's a myriad of things our doctors don't understand about how stress affects the body that we're still learning today. And I think that's really important because, hey, when we get to our 80s, you know, nobody's going to remember the job that we did or the firm that we worked
Right.
at. It's going to be,
Right.
what our health is like and the family and loved ones that we have around us.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
And the way Carla said it, I do think sometimes it's easier for us, like when we are in a stressful situation or something that does not feel right, thinking of how we would, like if our daughter or our best friend, somebody we love, is going through that situation, and what would we tell them? And then saying that back to us, right?
Right.
Right.
Because a lot of times, like we don't we don't treat ourselves like we would, or give ourselves the advice we would to our daughter or our best friend or sister, whoever, right? And I think sometimes that's kind of the practice we have to do, is to revert that out, imagine it to somebody else, and then give that answer back to you.
100%. 100%. I've been guilty of that my entire life.
Yeah, I mean, it is a constant learning experience for me, constantly, like always. I think I'm getting a little better, and then sure
Yeah.
enough, back where like it feels like I kind of like stepped back a bit, and I'm like, man, I really wish. It's even like nowadays, like I'm getting better at saying things about myself that are good, but then
Mm.
immediately I'll say something self-deprecating to even it out. Like I'm just like, what is wrong with me? It's just, oh man.
Yeah, no, I agree. There was actually a LinkedIn article I was reading the other day, and it was talking about self-worth and how oftentimes we place self-worth on our accomplishments. So example,
Hmm.
career or education or other things, but that really, just because just because you're human, you're worthy. That you don't need to
Mm,
have done a specific job. You don't have to be, the CEO of, Amazon to be worthy. You can
right.
be a janitor, you can be, a homemaker, you can be whatever, but just because you're human, you're worthy. And that's
Yeah.
really hard to like internalize. But it's something I
Hmm.
think we all need to do. And then that gives us strength to be able to operate in a world that is consciously trying to tell us, no, you're not worthy.
Hmm.
And I think that that's like an important message for parents, because I think, a lot of that starts at home when children are praised for their accomplishments and their achievements, as opposed to just being praised for being humans and just being, lovely little people. And um, it's funny because I'm conscious of it, but I still sometimes do it. If my children bring home a good grade, I want to tell them that I'm proud of them, but I also want to tell them, listen, I'm proud of you more for just being a good hearted and kind person.
Hmm.
If you get a good grade, that's wonderful. You worked hard. Awesome. But I always have to remind myself, make sure, I'm praising the whole person too, not
Yeah.
just the achievement.
Yeah. I mean, there's a whole movement on praise when it comes to parenting. Like, there's a whole style now that's come out, but they talk about how, yeah, like it's about being more specific about how you praise them, so that you're not just praising for just the sake of it, right? Like it's about something they did, not like the result of it, right? So it's like if they got a good grade, it's like, oh my gosh, look how well you studied, look how much you put yourself into this, and blah blah blah. But then there's another group now. There's like this doctor who is like doing this whole movement where it's like they're anti-praising altogether, like
Wow.
all together. Yeah. And I was like, I mean, I could understand where they were coming from, but I was like, man, that's a tall order, my friend. We grew up being embedded with that type of mentality.
I feel like we all need a little positive reinforcement, don't we?
Right?
Yes.
I think so. I mean, I love reinforcement, but then that starts to make me spiral. I'm like, well, is it because I got it a ton as a baby and as a toddler, and then all of a sudden it just became less and less and less, and now I'm constantly needing that state of approval? And this, like, I don't know. I think this person's a doctor, like psychiatrist person, but anyway, I haven't looked into it in a while. But I remember they were like, oh, just the basis of constantly regardless of what kind of praise, it's still reinforcing that they need that positive reinforcement. So if you don't do it at all, they don't expect it. Like they don't need it.
Yeah.
But I'm like, I can't. Like I try really hard, but I mean, I do all the right things though. They say, I'm like, if they draw something, I'm like, oh, look at the colors you did. Look at the effort you put in, that kind of thing. But it's so hard. It's constantly like trying not to say good job, right? Like they say, don't say good job. I'm like, oh my gosh.
Whew.
I know. They make parenting even harder now. It's like every year it's something else.
Well, I don't think there's any harm in being supportive. I mean, it's a tough world out there, right? And so when they come home, they need our support. I mean, everybody needs support, right?
Exactly.
So,
I agree. I don't think they're going to get as much as what they would get at home, and I want them to come back eventually.
Well, right. I think, when you're a kid, that's when you're going to get a lot of that supportive, feedback at home. And then once you're an adult, unless you like get a husband, talk to your parents, or get a pet, you're not going to get any supportive feedback. So you need that to, keep you going for all of those years when you're like, oh, I'm just by myself. Nobody's going to tell me.
I'm telling you, pets are the most supportive, at least in our household.
Well, my dogs are. My cats will just anger pee around me.
Oh no!
If I don't do something, if I don't do something they want, they'll just leave me surprises.
Maybe you need to be more supportive, Michelle.
I know. Maybe I was like, what am I doing wrong? I'm just living here with you. What am I doing wrong? They don't even like it when I touch them. I have to touch them with my feet. Like, I'm not even kidding. I have to pet them with my feet. And they love it. But then if I use my hands, they're like, ew, no.
Okay.
They're so weird.
Wow.
Got some
I have some weird animals. But yeah, I feel like this is a good time to end our episode. All of us laughing, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Hopefully it ends up.
Yeah, but thank you so much, Carla, for coming on.
Listening, they could take away some good lessons on how not to conduct yourself during maternity leave.
Yeah. No, we haven't had one. Like, we haven't had a maternity story, and I think this is huge because I feel like so many people, even now, like there are still issues, right? So, I think this can be very helpful to other people.
This jealous dynamic of women bosses sometimes too. We didn't really touch on that quite as much, but it's out there and it's real, and it's just something to be aware of. Like I think, some of those emotional difficulties with women bosses can be really stressful.
Yeah, that actually makes me think that we should do some sort of episode where we have like a psychologist friend on to talk about that whole female dynamic. I remember reading an article about like how, because it's so weird when you think that women are worse to women at times as bosses. And
I've experienced this as well, particularly when it's you're a woman and you're minority and your boss is also the same minority.
Yes.
Feel as though there can't be two of you that are successful in an organization.
Right. Wow. Or it looks like they're favoring you.
Correct.
Yeah, I had the same thing happen to my friend. Yeah. So that's a good thing for us to think about for another episode.
Yeah.
Yeah. But thanks again, Carly. This was so great having you on.
Yes, thank you so much for joining us.
Carla, sorry.
No worries.
All righty. Well, thank you all so much for listening. Make sure to like and subscribe, and we'll check back in with you next week. Bye.
Bye.
Do you have a bad boss experience you'd like to share with us? Visit our website, thebadbossjournal.com, to submit your story. You can also support our show by checking out our merch and more on our website. Thank you so much for listening to The Bad Boss Journal.